March 5th, 2023. Thought I'd do a little walk through the garden, late winter. Just had a snowfall, but it's melting off quickly, and I thought I'd point out some of the things that are visible in winter, and point out some trees that I'm either going to be removing or pruning back, coppicing, etc. Right here is a catalpa that showed up under the power lines. That's going to have to come out. It's just an incidental tree. Didn't mean for it to be there. I sprayed some deer repellent on these arborvitae this early winter, and it seems to have done the job for the most part, keeping them off, browsing them, which is good. Pretty cheap. Serviceberry looks fine. This little plum rootstock has some black knot that I have never gotten around to pruning off, but that's got to come off. Apologies for the brightness here. This is a multi-stemmed peach rootstock tree. Had some peaches last year, and that's going to need some good thinning. Peaches need a lot of pruning in general. It's kind of a mess, but I'll prune probably at least half of that wood out of there. The attractive seed heads of echinacea in winter, I guess the birds have not been on to those. I did take cyanwood already several weeks ago from a few things. I took a couple sticks from this Aromatnaya quince and some pears and apples that I have, seed heads of false indigo. So here's a couple of things here. These catalpa trees were cut down to the ground, kind of coppiced, I think three years ago, 3 or 4. So you can see they've got some kind of scraggly regrowth, but I may take them back down to the ground again, or at least remove most of the stems. Here's a little grafted pawpaw here that could use some more light. This is due south, and I guess we do have some daffodils peeking out there. I hadn't really been around to look to see if those were coming out, but I had seen other friends who were showing signs of life like that prematurely, because it's been a warmer than normal winter. Has not been a very hard winter. So as we walk through here, we just had snowfall a day and a half ago, so not much animal activity, but you see there's been some rabbits that were running at a pretty good pace because there's quite a distance between hops there. So as we come up here, you'll see some things that need to be thinned or removed. This little leaf linden here, I'm trying not to shoot into the sun here, I can avoid it. This little leaf linden with the yellow ribbons around it, those branches at least have to come off. And then I've got some serious pruning to do over here. I've got these 3 old apple trees that are overgrown and don't bear very good apples most years. Last year was a pretty good apple year. Rarely, about 1 in every 5 or 7 years we get a good apple year. But this honey locust, which is an incidental tree that I didn't plant, it just showed up here in a pile of leaves or something. It's gotten to the point where it's casting significant shade. There's a little chestnut behind it there. So yeah, this is the mother honey locust. This is probably a root runner maybe of that, and then there's another one there. So lest this become a forest of honey locust, or just get to the point where they're so large that they're not easy to cut down, I'm going to cut those down, at least this big one here and this little one here, to let some more light in. That'll give me some, I don't know, the wood, it's not as good as black locust wood in terms of utility or rot resistance, but do something with it maybe besides firewood. And then you'll see a bunch of these false indigos here. So this one, probably 2 years ago, I cut it down to the ground, and you can see all the straight regrowth that's come out from that, and the seed pods. It bears prolifically. So if I coppice those every couple of years or so, you get that nice straight regrowth that you can use for pole wood if you wanted to, crafty things, or whatever. But the problem is, if you coppice it every year, it doesn't flower. It flowers on the 2nd year wood. So I don't cut them all down every season. So what else do we have here? Signs of life. This looks like kitty prints here. I planted a bunch of, well, I got rid of a lot of chestnuts in the fall. I didn't get rid of that many persimmons. I probably gave 100 away, but I've still got about 200 persimmon seedlings here. So looking for homes for those in the spring. Made a new little raised grow bed, air prune bed for chinkapin chestnuts because I had a bunch of those and they sprout in the fall or winter time. They were sprouting in my fridge, so I had to get those into something. So there's probably, I don't know how many in there, 100 or something, quite a few. Looking forward to growing a bunch more of those out because they're awesome plants. So let's see, go through the junkyard here. Pardon the mess. This elderberry, I should take some cuttings of it. It's already starting to wake up. You can kind of see there's a little leaf initiation here coming out. I should have got those earlier. Grapes are still dormant, can still take cuttings of those, and still take cuttings of a lot of things. This is some kind of a ribes, I don't know, current tags, probably have it written down somewhere what it is. There's a few candidates here, like this one would be a good one for growing a new cutting, this long straight growth like this. You could stick those and make a bunch of new plants. I saw one of my other quince bushes was kind of showing signs of waking up a bit. Let's see if this one, yeah, this one's got some buds kind of swelling up and coloring up. These are one of the relatively early flowering things. So as I walk over here, we had a big storm recently in white pines, lost a few limbs here and there with some white pines. So you see ones that fell in this ice storm. I've laid down around my blueberries here to give them some little grass suppression and a little extra mulch because they could always use that acidic mulch. Well, these blueberries are not growing very well. This catalpa tree here, another incidental tree that I didn't plant. Have to think about that if I want to keep it before it gets too big. We'll see. Got a couple nice pawpaw trees in here. Some of these sassafras, which is what most of this stuff is, I want to thin out a bit to give the pawpaws a little bit more light. As they grow up now, they're to the point where they don't need shade anymore. This pawpaw is nice. This has got to be 10 feet tall. This is a good candidate for grafting, or maybe a little bit far beyond the point of grafting. Well, I could do some of the smaller branches maybe. But yeah, some of these flagged sassafras can come out. And as we come up here, this is kind of turning into a mess here, this thicket. I might want to thin out some of those cedars. I've got sassafras coming in, I've got autumn olive, there's a pawpaw there, poison ivy, of course. So making some decisions. Here's a red bud. Now here, looks like I had maybe flagged this one for removal, but in the ice storm we just had, the top of this one broke off. So that's going to be a malformed tree, even though that was a nicer looking tree, greener, more fruit and larger in general. I'm not sure how it'll regrow with that top being broken off like that. In here too, I've flagged one. That one maybe had the top broken off before. But anyway, as these things kind of grow up into a thicket, you can make some choices, you know, what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of. There's a pawpaw there with a tree tube wrapped around it to keep the deer from rubbing on it. These catalpa here, this was my coppice idea. These are planted way too close together for coppicing, and plus they're in a bit of shade, so they have not grown very well. So the ones that are flagged, I think, are set to be cut down to the ground, and so we'll let the other ones have some more light and space. A little oak tree here. That's an incidental, looks like something in the, well, the hybrid family, I don't know. It's got kind of indeterminate characteristics. More of the overgrowth there. Autumn olive here. These are some grafts I did last year. I did some pruning and took cyan wood. So this was a Kiefer pear, and then I think I had a couple others over here that I had a lot of growth on that I took cyans from, and then they'll have a single trunk left, which will be better. This area here, I may do some management, some thinning. Kind of got all these plum sprouts here, wild goose plum. Could dig some of those out, some of the smaller ones, and pot those up and give them to people. I'll show you some pruning I did over here. This was a graft onto a calorie type pear, bird planted deal. And you can see I've pruned most of it off. It's still got kind of a bad form here. So what will happen, I'll cut this off with a bigger saw. I couldn't do it, I didn't want to do it with my pruning shears. But this is a graft point here, so everything above that I had nice sign wood. Oh, there's a bunny. Sorry, bud. And here's the graft union. Probably not going to show very well. It's a bit strange looking, but hopefully that will grow out nicer. But nice straight growth. I had probably at least 5 feet of growth on that last year. Nice. And so I've got more candidates for grafting around here. I've got more seedling plums and apples in this mess. You can't really tell, but you can tell when the leaves come out. Brush pile, good habitat, or rabbitat as my friend Steve would say. Although I'm not thrilled about the rabbits being here. They are good for the ecosystem and they are food for something else, even if they annoy me by girdling my trees a lot. So walking over here, many piles. I've got big piles of wood chips over there, probably a dozen truckloads. Then I got 3 large dump truckloads of shredded leaves dumped in the fall. That was nice. Whoa, what do we got going on here? Wow, this is weird. So this is a sad little grafted plum tree, and it's got some kind of affliction to the bark. Something looks like it died a year ago, and then something's been tunneling under and eating under the bark. I thought at first it looked kind of like rabbit damage, you know, when the snow gets tall and rabbits gnaw on things, but that's definitely insect damage there. So that plum is dead, although it never grew very well anyway, and I never had a fruit off of it in 10 years or whatever that I had it. Here's a sad old peach tree that's fallen over. I don't know if I'll do much pruning on this. I've pretty much written the thing off at this point. It's got disease, broken off branch, all kinds of problems. Speaking of malformed trees, there's a white pine that had its top broken off at some point, and hasn't grown as well as some of the other ones I have here. But yeah, it doesn't have like an obvious leader. I guess this one here wants to be it. I'm going to prune out some of these black locusts that are growing around here. And we do have bird habitat. We got a little bird's nest in there, if you can see that. So white pines are great habitat, and they're just beautiful. Generally fast growing trees. It's our state tree in Michigan. Again, yellow ribbons mean things are coming out. Black locust, I've got a lot of redundant black locust, and it's creeping over into that area too. This chestnut is an absolute mess. It's got about 5 or 6, 8 trunks. We'll have to do some decision making here and get rid of at least a few of those so that we are down to maybe 2 or 3 trunks. And I've got a few larger black locusts. Like this one here, I don't have ribbons around it, but this one is set to probably come down at that size. Maybe it could be left for another year because it's not shading. Well, there is a chestnut behind it and some dogwoods back there that I'd like to give more light to. But this one here, kind of a strange growth habit, but these 2 trunks of black locust, the one on the left is probably a good candidate for a fence post or 2. This one may be a little on the thin side for that. It's only 4 or 5 inches diameter in places, so I don't think that would be a great fence post by the time you get the bark off. But yeah, the chestnuts keeping their leaves for the most part. See if I can get out of the sunlight here. This apple tree here is needs a lot of pruning help. It has a couple of branches that you may have seen in older videos. I believe this one here and one of these over here that had much different, much larger apples than the norm. So the normal apples on this were just little crabs, and it's got a funky trunk situation, but that's how these things like to grow, with multiple twisted up trunks. So yeah, there's some black locust that will be cut out behind that. Another black locust there that'll come out. Some other ones. Had a chestnut here. I believe this is the first one with this little 2 on it. This is the first one of my Allison chestnuts that had any nuts on it last year. So that was exciting. Maybe do a little pruning on that. Take out this black locust, which is kind of to the south of it. This larger one here to the north of it. This one probably can stay for another year or so. Some of these are getting to the point where they've got seed pods, and when they're big enough to flower, then they're big enough to have the seed pods. So the flowers are really a wonderful part of growing black locusts. Here's my little test pit. It actually has some water in it right now because we've had a fair amount of moisture and some rain, melting snow and whatnot. Little chestnut there, black locust. You know, these narrow crotch angles are bad. So if I wanted to keep this and grow it as a fence post, you know, I'd want to limb that up and keep it to one good trunk. But see, it's got damage from borers and stuff in here, so I don't think it'll make a nice pole anyway. Box elder there with deer rub damage. Wild black cherry here. That's got kind of a funny appearance because I limbed it up. That may come down this year here shortly. What else do we have? We've got a few more chestnuts over here. Wild goose plum there, chestnut, black locust, chestnut, a bunch of black locust, seaberry. Seaberry, I probably should take some cuttings. So I don't know what's male or female, fruiting or non-fruiting. Nothing is fruited yet after years. So here's some little black locust that'll come out. Some larger wild black cherry that will come out. I might leave one of those trunks, the one that's not flagged. But again, I've got chestnuts to the north of that I want to give some light to. This is a chestnut here to the east of it. The sumac stuff, I'm gonna let that grow for a while, grow into a thicket. This larger black cherry here, it's not really bothering anything at the moment. That may leave that for another year or so, because it's kind of on the north side of some good things. So maybe we'll leave that for some structure, let it grow on. This is a chinkapin chestnut, the mother, one of the two mother trees of all the seedlings I just planted. There's another chinkapin chestnut there. There's a wild black cherry that's to the south of this Chinese chestnut that has some funky intertwining trunks there. A lot of problems with this one. This is a what not to do kind of test case. Got branches growing into other trunks. I've got fence wire that's embedded and almost girdled these things. Had ambrosia beetle damage before. Yeah, some of these things look pretty rough. So I probably want to do something about these two trunks at least, you know, make some decisions here. Or I could just leave it and say, what the hell, see what happens, let it grow into some monstrous thing and see what nature does with it, but I don't know. It's hard to make these decisions sometimes because you watch something grow and you're so excited to see it grow, but then you hate to prune it. The remnants of the hornet nest there that was in my timber chestnut, and this tree is still a beauty. I think it's probably about 35 to 40 feet tall. Here's a big buck rub under the tree here. And I've been reading more about deer and their habits, and so that's interesting to me that they did that under this tree. Now I'm looking at the bark here. I'm seeing a little bit of this kind of splitting, and I don't know if that's the bark starting to change texture or if that's blight starting to come in. But we're going to be watching this here too. We've got a little bit of that fissuring kind of appearance. So that might be blight showing up finally. Be a shame if this gets blight badly, although it's been a hell of a tree. Just in 10 years, it's put on all this growth that you see here. Nice diameter. Breast height, it's got to be probably, 7.5, 8 inches, I would say. So really, really nice tree. I wish they'd all grown that well. Let me see if I can get out of pointing into the sunshine here. So straight ahead there, we've got a big cluster of wild black cherry. And these are gonna come down, or at least most of the trunks will. Again, because I've got some pecans to the north of them. Got a nice pecan here that could use some more light. It's really struggling and bent over. So this is all grown up in the last dozen years or so. This poor pecan is like all leaned over. I gotta brace it up and try to get it to grow a little straighter. This thicket here is winged sumac, and then we've got two what were supposed to have been sweet cherries or sweet and sour cherries but they were just the rootstock, the malib cherry, so those are useless. Could cut those down. There's a wild black cherry there that could probably go because it's in the power line right of way. Got a few pawpaws here. There's little guy. Oh, this wild apple tree. The right hand trunk is a graft. The left hand trunk is the wild crabapple. It doesn't have good fruit. So I may do a major, wow, almost fell there. May do a major prune job and cut this main trunk off. Something was eating or pooping there. That's kind of interesting. I don't know what eats these little crabs, maybe birds in the wintertime. That's cool. This catalpa here, it's kind of to the south side of some little pawpaws, and I want to give them some more light. So this catalpa was a coppiced at the same time as the other ones you saw earlier with the power line deal, probably 2019. So that pawpaw, and then these others here could use some more light. Got some black locusts growing up here, these taller 3 or 4 things. I did some limbing up last winter, but need to keep doing that. Try to get like a nice single trunk. Here we've got a double trunk and then almost a triple one. So this side branch should come off. These limbs should come up. Try to get at least one straight pull out of these things. This is a walnut. This might be one of those Japanese heart nut hybrid butter heart nuts. That red cedar behind it's a little close for comfort, so it's kind of affecting the way this tree is growing out and away from it. So I may cut that red cedar down, even though it's a nice little tree. I've got a lot of them around. Wouldn't be the biggest loss. Speaking of red cedars, here's I don't know if that's a double trunked specimen or 2 that grew together. But anyway, there's 2 growing there, right against that apple tree. So maybe I would cut out the north side trunk and let the apple have a little bit more light. There's a wild multiflora rose. I should get that out of here. It's just an annoyance or invasive thorny thing. Grafted apple. This is a graft. Speaking of last year's grafts, I took a bunch of sign wood here, so this hasn't totally healed over yet, but it was a bark graft. Ayers pear. I've got a note of that somewhere, but I'm gonna set it down here so it doesn't get blown away. But anyway, had another 5-6 feet of good growth off of that, and lots of sign wood to grab. Over here, we're coming up to a spot where I've got a bunch of eastern red cedars planted as a windbreak / privacy fence here. There's a red pine in front, some kind of a fir or spruce behind that. But every other one of these red cedars will come out, and that will allow them to have a much nicer form, because it's at the point that right now they look really good. But after a year or 2, they're going to really start smothering each other. So if I remove every other one, it'll make a much nicer tree line over the years. And when I planted these things, they were only knee-high probably, so they've grown up pretty well. There's another white pine, it looks like. Here's a nice white pine there that's grown up pretty well and starting to make its own little shade underneath. At one time, I had a whole row of evergreens planted. You can see there's one here, there's one there. It's a white pine, kind of by this thicket of wild plum. But I don't know what happened. Some of them didn't make it. Maybe the plum overwhelmed them. You can see it kind of continues on there, but there's a big gap here, and there's one there. So I don't know what's going on with that, but anyway, it's fine. The wild plum is welcome. It's spread out into a couple thousand square foot thicket. Let's see, turn my camera here. Here's a wild black cherry that's, I guess it's not bothering anything at the moment, so I'll leave that for another year probably. See what happens, see how it looks next year. You know, having more density of stems and trees is a good thing here. We don't want this open field kind of feeling. We want a young forest kind of feeling. So there's a happy medium somewhere. You know, leaving trees as long as you can will help get you to the woodland state faster. So these incidental things like this, looks like a baby white pine. Fun. How many things do we have per bract? Yeah, that's a white pine. So that was a seedling probably from that one or that one somehow. Maybe? I don't know. Or it came from somewhere. There aren't any other large white pines right around here. But anyway, there's a American plum I planted, a couple of wild cherries. Probably leave those for another year or so. There's nothing that they're bothering. These pink flags that you might see, those are chestnuts that I planted, new ones, this last fall. So that's exciting. I planted about 20 to 25 good chestnuts from good parents. So that's really cool. Looking forward to those someday. This wild black cherry here, it's kind of right on the edge of a roadway. This is the main vehicular path through the middle of the garden back here. And it's got this kind of funky double trunked appearance. Not good. You know, this would not be good over the long term. You'd have rot and stuff going on in there. Cool scars where I've taken some branches off. So I should probably either cut one of these branches off, which will leave a huge wound, or cut the whole thing down and let it regrow. You know, if I cut it the whole thing down, it'll probably grow, 6 or 10 feet in the first year because it's got a lot of energy in the roots. The thing's probably at least 40 plus feet tall. So we may do that. Here we've got a catalpa, where we don't need one, growing up under a oak tree. So that probably should come out. At this point, it probably could be transplanted. It's about 5 feet tall. If I wait too much longer, it wouldn't work. There's some, what kind of pine is that? Scots pine, I think. Duh, sorry, brain dead here. Here are a bunch of new chestnut trees. All these pink flags are chestnuts. This was originally going to be an evergreen area of different evergreens, but I've kind of scrapped that plan. There are still some evergreens back here that I've planted and a few that have shown up on their own. This one's got some major problems. This is a fir, I think. I don't know what attacked this. There's all different insects and as well as animals that get onto these things. So kind of the end of my property back here, another white pine. It's got kind of an interesting different form to the leaves. They're not very expanded. The needles rather. Autumn olive, some incidental oaks, more firs or spruces that have big problems. Wild black cherry there, not bothering anything. I'll leave that for a while. Got a few oaks here. A hedgerow, there's nothing I really have to do in there except maybe fill in a few blank spots where things have died. We'll see what comes back this spring. I did a bunch of mulching in my persimmon area this last winter and early spring. So back here, you can't really tell. There's a bunch of new nurse logs and things that I've dumped back here. That'll probably take a couple of years to start paying the dividends. But anything I can do to get persimmons to fruit faster is time well spent. So here you can see a good example. I think that maybe this was coppiced last year and from a pretty well established plant. This is a false indigo. I think you can see I left one branch of the old stuff, and that's what's got these seed pods on it. So I guess with these plants, if you coppice 90% of the thing but leave 10%, you can have the best of both worlds. You get all this nice straight regrowth that I could clip all these things off and use them for something. And then you still have a couple flowers happening for the bees, because it's a wonderful flowering plant, really, really nice. Or you could just cut every other one every other year so that you've always got some in flower and you've always got some for craft wood. That one, again, 2 years ago probably, because I see like sub branches on those. Pine, wild cherry, persimmon. I've got a couple persimmons back here that are big enough to be flowering, but have not really seen much in the way of flowering back here yet. Unfortunately, the only persimmons that have flowered for me have all been male. Go figure. But I'm hopeful that I'll be having some persimmon fruit from my own trees one of these years soon. Could be this year, maybe next year if not. This is an early spring. which is not a good thing here on this site that has late frosts all the time. So my fear is that everything is going to wake up too early, and then we will get zapped, as we always do in April or even May sometimes, with late frosts, and everything will be leafed out and you won't get fruit on most things. But that's a risk we take here all the time. It happens a lot more than I would like it to, but there's nothing I can do about it. I picked this poor site to begin with, so just gotta live with it. And when I do get something, it's a pleasant surprise. I just kind of go into every season with the assumption that I'm not going to get anything from any plant. And then if I do get something, it's just a nice surprise. It's like, oh wow, that actually didn't fail this year. That's cool. But that's most of what I'm going to be pruning out. There's a couple resprouted things from the power construction 3 years ago. There's a black cherry, box elder, and walnut. Another black cherry. May prune some of that stuff down. But yeah, I got a little bit of chainsaw work and some work with the loppers and bow saw for sure. So thanks for watching, and hope you're having a good winter. Looking forward to spring. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do in my garden this year because we're making a push to get moved into the house that we're renovating just across the way over there. So I'm not planning on having it be a real major garden year for me, but we'll see. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.